Good evening and welcome to the Millis Public Schools School Committee meeting on November 8th, 2022. Before I read my announcement, I'd like to do a roll call. I am the chairperson, Stephen Catalano. Denise Gibbons, the secretary.
Here.
Robin Briggs.
Here.
Mr. Conroy, Mark Conroy. Here. Kerry Roach is absent tonight. We have a teacher rep, Stephanie Copese. Mrs. Copese is here. The student reps are not here. Mr. Mullaney, the superintendent, is here, as well as Terry Wiggin, the Director of School Finance and Human Resources. Before we get into the agenda, I want to announce that this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on Mondays at 7 p.m. on Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 37. All meeting videos are also posted to the Millis Public Schools website under School Committee. All videos are also available on YouTube. All school committee minutes and agendas can be found on the school committee page of the Millis Public School website. Persons wishing to speak during open session must sign in before the meeting starts. Comments are not to exceed 3 minutes in time. Individuals may not name students, staff, or parents. All topics for discussion must be limited to those items listed on the evening's agenda, and all comments must be directed to the chair. The committee may not respond to public comments. It shall be their decision to discuss issues at a later date. All times on the agenda are approximate. Susan, is there anyone signed in for open session?
There is not.
Okay. Ms. Copese, are you ready for your report?
I am ready. I brought you a present.
Oh, I love a
Oh my
present.
goodness. I know what it is.
Is this a test?
You asked for it.
This is bones of a mouse.
Yep, out of an owl pellet. Wow. You don't get to keep it, but I just wanted to
Fantastic.
enjoy it. I'll get it on my way.
Can
I
I,
love
can I, can I look at this and view this while?
Oh, yes.
I almost feel like this should be under time and learning instead of the teaching. I'm learning.
Ba-dum-bum.
So, as you're setting up,
So many questions.
is it a come? Oh yeah, you give this to me. I got a few questions. Does this come clean like this, or do they have to clean this?
Well, I mean, the digestive system takes care of quite a bit of the stuff that you might associate with a living thing. And so then it's just kind of wrapped in detritus. Like, you know, it's like it's dried and then it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
preserved. Like it's pasteurized, for lack of a better word, before we get it. You know, we didn't get these like fresh out of the field.
So they eat the mouse whole and then just digest it.
Yeah,
Or
kind
they
of
chew it a
like
little.
snakes do as well and things of that nature.
I'd like to pass this around. Can I pass this around?
Feel free. Shall I begin? Because I'm going to go to sleep soon.
Please do.
All right, from this Clyde Brown, October ran a very successful Socktober sock drive for the local shelters. So a big thank you from the folks at Clyde Brown. Everybody had conferences last week, and at the Clyde Brown, they said they had a very positive experience for both students, families, and staff. The CFB original works have been created under the guidance of Mr. Poulos, and the information packets have gone home. I still have one of those magnets, not in my fridge because, of course, nothing sticks to a refrigerator any longer, but I have one. The third graders are coming tomorrow to chemistry. They're coming again on Thursday and next week. They'll be doing some meteorology activities that we've been building. And interestingly, the third graders are also being visited by a meteorologist on Thursday as part of the curriculum enhancement program. So a big thank you out to the folks who've helped with that. We're pretty excited. And the fourth graders will be enjoying a presentation by Wingmasters on Monday in their study of animal adaptations. They might like to see the insides of the owl pellet for that. So a lot of good stuff going on down at Clyde Brown. In the middle school, we have had the middle school podcast, The Big M, created a novel idea, which is hosted by Phoebe Allen and Abigail Kay. Lots of things going on in the podcast land. The seventh grade science, it's a big week for science. This is not me, by the way. This is just people giving me things. Seventh grade science class is welcomed a guest speaker from the iRobot company this week. Mr. Bove, a software engineer, talked with the students about engineering robotics and the collaboration of creating the company's products. He brought a couple of Roombas and let the kids disassemble them and play with them. So that was really cool. Grade 6 participated in Socratic seminars to discuss the importance of privacy. This is including creating one-pagers to show what they learned in their study of Count Me In. And the grade 7 goal of the month is responsibility. And so the teachers will be recognizing students over the course of the month. So probably the next time I come back, we'll have some 7th graders recognized for their responsibility. In grade 8, 5 grade 8 Spanish immersion students were selected to participate in this year's Spanish Mentors program. Each Tuesday, they're going to go across the street to Mr. Claus's 3rd grade class to practice conversational Spanish while assisting with math facts and games. The 8th graders are going to be Sydney O'Toole, Ella Maher, Harrison Lower, Hayden Leach, and Matt Curley. So kudos to them. Up in the high school, Kayla and Brianna Dulac, actually they won the grand prize for the Massachusetts Safe Streets PSA competition. They got a $600 gift card to Amazon presented to them by the Mass Secretary of Transportation in Boston.
That's great.
So that is really
Fantastic.
cool.
Is the PSA, have they shown it in school?
I believe we had links to it.
Yeah, we have links.
I
to
feel
it.
I've seen it, so I don't know if we've seen it in school as a whole. My guess is we'll see it at our next Stuco assembly as a group.
That's great.
But I know Danielle has sent links out, and if you go to the Millis Memories page that Danielle puts out, then my guess is it is up there already.
Great.
Likely going to show up on the Mass DOT website at some point as well, because usually that's what happens. Also out of the TV production area, we've got our podcasts on Spotify, Alexa, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And this month they are recommending Cat's Council, a safe place for open dialogue about the high school experience and a modern take on the Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, if you remember that from many, many years ago. The host is Catherine LeDuc, and she's bringing in other high school students to kind of share in. The AP Lang students were excited to... This is written by the teachers, so I think they were excited. I know my child was personally. They were very excited to rhetorically analyze the Taylor Swift songs and music videos following her latest album release. So they do a lot of rhetorical essay work in there. And so I know I heard about it at home, so that's probably a good sign. All of the 10th graders will be participating in the annual Veterans Day project tomorrow. So we'll be bringing in the veterans. We've got 14 different veterans and/or active military members, and all the sophomores today were kind of talking about how they're excited to see who they get tomorrow.
That's great.
So it's like a weird draft. I don't know if the veterans know that the kids are excited to get them. Hopefully they do. The Spanish 4 honor students are presenting Famous Spaniards this week as they continue a 3-week-long hiatus from grammar and vocabulary as they study Spanish culture. So that sounds exciting. And the Drama Club will be performing Murders in the Air, spelled H-E-I-R, on Friday, November 18th and November 19th in the auditorium. So they're very excited about their performance coming up. From Ties, they attended a Worcester's Railers hockey game today and had a great time. The students are working on their local internships, their paid jobs, and at the BSU program. And they had a bunch of students who were registered to vote and understand the campaign and got to vote today. So that's really
great.
exciting. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
And then out of the athletic director's office, he added his own category to my list this week. The MIA Fall State Tournament began last week with our girls volleyball, boys soccer, football, girls soccer all qualifying. Golf qualified earlier in October for the first time in school history, as Henry told us last time. Volleyball won their first round match and will be heading to East Hampton tomorrow for round of 16. Girls and boys soccer in their round 32 matches were 4-2 and 3-2 respectively. Football fell to Lowell Catholic in their first round game. And cross country continues to grind as some prepare for sectional and state tournaments. Ben McCarthy and Shay Conroy earned medals last weekend at the Mooney Invitational. Congratulations to them. And of course, winter registration is open for basketball, track, field, gymnastics co-op with Medway, ice hockey co-op with Bellingham. And parents are reminded that we now register via Family ID. So it's the fun transition between sports seasons. And that's what I have for you this evening.
Excellent. Great. Great
Am I allowed to
presentation.
take the owl bones back to Miss Cheney?
Yeah.
Please
Yes,
do.
you
That was a
may.
class project. They
Feel
need-
free.
Oh, no, they were excited to share them with you all.
Yes.
So,
Could they bring a
Very
live
cool.
owl in here?
you have to go to the Wingmasters presentation with the grade 4 if you want to see a live
I'm
owl.
not sure. I could just show up at a presentation.
What's the rules, Bob?
Bob? We'll talk about it.
Bob,
That's
Bob's taking the fifth. I like it.
Stuff you
Bob
decide.
said,
Well
yeah,
done.
Sure, we'll go to the amusement park. Sure, yeah, we'll go. Thank
I
you,
love
Ms.
it. That's
Scobie.
very cool.
That's
Thank you,
actually very.
Stephanie.
All
It is
kidding
really
aside,
It's very
that's
cool.
Very cool.
These get done at a lot of different grade levels, and they kind of do different things.
Did
with
they
them.
get skied out initially, or did they get right by that?
So I haven't done them in a long time personally, but I've never had anyone who was
That
like,
is so cool.
ew, don't make me do that.
It's very
So,
cool.
Yeah, I find this stuff fascinating.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, you asked last week, or last time, do you think I'd forget?
I did not. Okay. I feel like I'm in school. There are two action items. The first action item is to consideration to approve the 10:25 school committee meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Gibbons.
I make a motion to approve the 10/25/2022 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
A motion been moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next action item is the consideration to approve an increase in extended day fees. Joining us at the front table is Mr. Wigan. You've earned your keep on this. You've presented multiple times. We've asked a lot of questions. Thank you for getting us the information. I will let you take it away. Just as a reminder for the viewing audience is that we've not necessarily uncovered. We've dug into the rather large deficit in extended day that's mostly due to us, mostly due to a lack of or a decrease in the amount of students in the program. And we're not in a position to, we really don't have any reserve fund anymore to fund. We made a decision during the pandemic to keep our staff employed. And so now we're not in a position, we really have no reserve at all to cover any deficit. So that's where we stand. Could you take away, Mr. Wigan?
Okay. And so there were two spreadsheets that, again, they're not new, but are updated. And I want to get you to, the first one is in your packets, is probably going to look like that, if you have it manually. And if you know what it is on the screen, it's very colorful at this point. It's got all kinds of colors to it. Couple of things that I did with this one. At the request of the committee, I gave an indication of what 5% would be for an increase this year, and because I was doing 5%, I said, well, you know what, 7.5%. It's easy enough to do that as well. But one of the things that was interesting as I did this, I kind of looked at the revenues, and I said, well, wait a minute. I really haven't got these quite as precise as I should have. And so I went and I literally broke it down almost day by day. And in some cases, there was, in the earlier spreadsheet, there was a revenue increase, for example, for summer that really wouldn't occur at all because summer's gone. We've done summer for FY23. In other cases, such as the February and April vacations, whatever increase you might consider would be a full increase because it's after January 1st. But in still other situations, for example, and to use something easy, if you have a 10% increase, it's not going to be a true 10% for the year.
Right.
It's a fraction of that. And basically, long story short, there's 105 days left after January 1st. So I took that percentage and worked out the calculations of what the actual increase would be. So it's a little bit more refined, and I think it gives you a much stronger and more accurate revenue picture. Again, that played into the impact on families, and again, the impact on families for the different programs is here for 5% and 7.5% as well. And finally, I thought, simply because of sort of the way we were talking about, okay, we're in a place, how long would it take us to get back to a place where we'd be break even? And so what I did is I took, based on a 5% increase, and I said, well, granted that's maybe a little hefty to think of it annually, but what if we did? And said, we're going to do 5% each year, including what we're doing starting in January, and play that out. And I used a 5% annual increase in benefits. I used a 2.5% annual increase in salaries and other expenses. And basically by FY30, okay, certainly FY29, you're close. FY30, I think you're there. You're back to break even.
Did you increase any of the enrollment, or did you keep the enrollment as is?
It assumes the enrollment is static. So enrollment increases could conceivably get you there sooner. Okay, obviously enrollment decreases could be more problematic. Likewise, if there are other things that, for example, if benefits don't go up quite as much, then that obviously helps. If expenses don't go up quite as much, that helps. Those types of things.
So, thank you. You've done a lot of work, and you've cleared up some questions and some concerns. But I think we're now at the point where, one, we owe it to the families to let them know what is happening in January. We also owe it to the families to let them know what potentially could be happening next September. And I don't want to fast forward to the next presentation, your next report out. But we have, based on the conversation we started to have last meeting about our shortfall last year, we're not operating in a deficit. Things are not getting better, things are getting worse. And we are in a very precarious position with our budget.
Mm-hmm.
And in years past, trying to find $50,000 or $60,000, not that that's easy money, but you could, someone moves back into district, someone moves out, more people move in, you could potentially find that. I am concerned that we are not in that position now, meaning I have a real concern about our revenue versus expenses next year. And we have problems in this program, not problems by management, not problems by the delivery of service. We have problems we have a revenue problem. Because our enrollment is down, right? And so I just don't see enough kids coming into this program to make it sustainable, nor do I think, even though your estimates were conservative, I don't know if we really can play this out over the course of the next 6 years and cover those shortfalls. And I struggle with this idea because, one, both of my kids were in the program. The program treated my family very well. It was great for the kids. I think the program is run very well, but I'm really concerned about the budget reality of this program. So I wanted to go first. I want to hear, and I think we agreed that we were going to take a vote tonight because parents need to know. Mm-hmm. One, about what could happen on January 1, and then two, the bigger picture looming over of, is this a sustainable program? I will also make one more comment and then open to the rest of the committee. I think we have to have a long, hard look at our fee-based programs and start to really think about increasing in some programs. We have not increased. We've done very well as a committee. I just don't know if we're in an environment where we cannot increase anymore. And I'm not for increasing just to increase, just to say we increase. I think we have to look at some of these programs and do a deep dive like you. I think some of them will be a little easier than this. Mm-hmm. But I think as a committee, we owe it to our budget. And we want to maintain reasonable increases and not overdo it. But I think that's a part of the conversation. We don't have to have that tonight, but I think that's coming forward. So I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gibbons.
I share your concern about where we are as we look forward from a budget perspective for next year, and I am concerned with subsidizing the extended day program with funds that we desperately need in the district operating budget. And I know we'll get to it later on, but with other areas of the budget having drastic increase in costs for us, This is a fantastic program. It's a benefit for teachers. I know a lot of teachers have their children in the program. It's very convenient. It's extremely valuable. The numbers are really challenging for us, and I think we need to put the money someplace else where it's needed inside the operating budget, and not have us continue down the path of running in a deficit and having to find the money for extended day, which is not part of the required services that we need to provide to students in the district.
Robin or Mark?
So I also agree that this is really hard to figure out and give up funds that we have to have for other areas in the district. I do. I guess I wonder too, like, if January 1st is if we were to increase, if January 1st is a feasible deadline or time to give to families, as it's the middle of November now, the holidays are coming up, like prices are increasing, like, does it have to be that day? Could it be February 1st? I don't know if that does anything, but I do know that looking at these numbers, it seems like any little bit that we do is not really going to put a dent in the shortfall that we have. So I'm struggling with, like, doing it at all, because it's like gonna gain us $3,000 if we do the smallest amount. And, like, is that gaining us things? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know where to begin to decide what the percentage should be based on these numbers. Like, it has to be at the end, but, like, that's not fair to families. So, like, I'm struggling with this whole
Right.
thing.
This is not an easy conversation.
Yeah. And I have, my kids are in extended day, so I have a stake in this, and it's not that I don't want to pay this extra money, or that we don't like the services. Like, it's great. My kids like extended day, and it's excellent for my family. So I'm, like, super struggling because I'm trying to decide how that's going to pan out for me personally too, on top of this, like, looking at these numbers here. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think the projections going out, I mean, basically with the 5% and in essence, you know, just rounded up to 3% overall expense increase is basically what these multi-year projection plays out. Yeah, in, you know, whatever, FY29, we break even. The problem is we have to fund 200,000 between now and the next 5 years. And as everybody else has said, I don't know that we have 40 or 50,000 right now that I could justify putting into a program that is not a mandated program. It's supposed to be a self-funding program. You know, again, with the enrollment, and Terry, thanks for going back and getting the enrollments, and adding in but we've going back to, see what years, I didn't write the years down, but basically pre-pandemic, 25% of students in Clyde Brown, including preschool, so it's the preschool all-in number, 25% used extended day. Coming out of the pandemic, it's down to 16% in 22 and 18% for 23. So we've dropped, you know, 10% of the Clyde Brown population we've lost 10% of our student population. Unfortunately, that doesn't translate to, you know, it's much like when we have school choice throughout the districts. If you have 10 kids across the whole district, you know, come in or go out at school choice, if you have 10 kids leave, doesn't mean you lose a teacher because those 10 kids
Right.
have left, right? It's the same thing. We've lost all of these we've lost this percentage of enrollment at extended day, but it's not translating to a staffing model
Right.
that can still maintain profitability or break even.
Therein lies the problem.
Right. And again, you know, we were working on probably a 10, you know, the reserve that was in there pre-pandemic would have probably gotten us another 5 years and would have allowed us to maybe head some of this off with marginal increases. But it also, without the pandemic, we probably wouldn't have a 10% drop in enrollment because, you know, working from home, et cetera. I also look at the rate increases for this year and the impact, and I'm kind of in the same boat as Robin. Like, you look at what it means and it just doesn't. In some respects, it's every dollar matters, but at the same time, 10, 15% increase is not going to solve the problem.
Well,
And
we're
it'd be
putting a
more
hardship on-
right. It's a significant hardship on families for not solving a problem that we have.
So I
And-
sort of wonder, one of the things that we asked last week was if you could find funding for this, and I'm wondering if I know that we're like looking for funding for everything right now, but if we found funding for this year, maybe we increase going, like a lot more than 5% going forward, so parents can plan and know, okay, next year, this is what extended day is gonna cost.
So can I get some clarification?
Yeah.
Not just in general. Until we get a revenue stream, which may or may not happen, so I want to be careful that we're not saying things and signaling something that is not necessarily a likelihood. It'd be great if we could find it. Where do people, I guess we should look at it this way, where do people feel going forward? No revenue comes in, meaning, is there a program on July 1st? I mean, that's the question. Mark?
I can't see supporting, given everything that I think we're going to be facing in an operating budget, I can't support putting $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 into this program out of funds that should be designated towards the operating budget and other things, and to compensate for costs that we absolutely have to incur by law.
So are you suggesting that this program doesn't exist on January 1st?
No, not January, you said July.
No, okay, July 1st, okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, July.
We're all in agreement that we get through this school year, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't being cute, I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure we're
Yeah.
on the same page.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of what happens on January 1st, it's a question of what happens on July 1st. So Terry, before we continue our conversation, you need a magic hat after this meeting, okay? Do you think at the end of the year, we're gonna be able to cover this deficit? Because it's projected right now at 65,000. Where we do nothing, we don't increase anything, we ride it out. Because I also don't wanna do something that we can't cover, right?
Well, I think I was always, from the early part of analyzing this, I was faced with the fact that I was going to cover some kind of deficit in this program. Shortfall in this program,
Yeah.
however you want to describe it. And so, yes, I've begun to make contingency, plans for this, But again, I would say, and I think it's been pointed out, I think Committee Member Conroy pointed it out, is that whatever contingency plans I make to do something in this year to cover this, obviously, does have input back for certain things that would also conceivably impact next year.
We have to make a difficult decision. I personally, and I know no one's saying it, but I think we have to say this loud and clear, that I would not want to do anything to close this program down in the middle of the school year. I think that would be a horrendous thing to do to parents. It would be unfair, and I could not support that. But I think we have to be realistic about finding, at this point, $65,000.
So-
Go ahead.
So I was wondering what you could find. So let's say you could find like 50,000. That could show us, okay, well, we can get there by adding 10%, and then that could be our number that we increase by potentially this year. Like, that's why I was wondering, like, what funding can we find to help us navigate what percentage we need to increase by for this
But
year?
I think, and I'll let Mr. Wigan explain, but I think he's looking for one-time money, meaning a cost savings in one line item to get us through June.
Sure.
I don't think it becomes sustainable, he's gonna find 50,000, and then we do a 10% increase and get us there, unless I'm missing something. Absent a dedicated grant or some sort of award, and I also don't want to create false expectations that could happen. It would be great if it could, right?
No, sure, but that would like lead us in a place of like where we could increase and then potentially increase a little bit each year, like Terry was saying, on the bottom one, so that's our kind of starting increase, and then kind of where we're gonna go from there to help us get to that next point. Like, that was just my thought process.
No, I understand. Mr. Wigan?
So when I was looking at this, and again, I've run all kinds of iterations here. When I was looking at this, particularly the revised version, all right, I start from a basis of saying if nothing is done, then I'm faced with $65,000 that I need to find. So from my standpoint, anything that I can do to improve upon that means it's easier for me to fill the gap. All right? And it's roughly, and I want to say this very roughly, about $10,000 of gap filling that each iteration that I've done accomplishes. So for example, at 5%, you go down to a $54,000 gap. At 7.5%, you go down, it's not quite 10, it goes down to 48. At 10%, which I really think is really as far as you could dare go, it goes down to 43, but that's almost $20,000 of the gap that gets filled. But again, any iteration of additional revenue makes it that much easier for me then to go to look for other sources, including grants, okay, for ways to fill the remaining balance. It also, and again, this is where I think your question was very astute, is saying what happens July 1. It also becomes a base if the program continues. Now, I think it was the viability of the program in the long term is an important question, given what you face. So I'm not going to go back into that. But, you know, again, I can't give a hard answer other than to say whatever you can do to help or choose to do to help makes it easier for me to fill the gap.
So, I guess a way to look at it would be, as we sit here tonight without increased revenue, the viability of the program on July 1 is in question. Serious question. So then that becomes, so let's just, for the sake of this part of the conversation, stipulate the program expires on 6/30. The fiscally responsible thing to do is try to get whatever we can to close the deficit, because we're taking money from one place that could go to out-of-district tuitions, new supplies, whatever, because we've been shortchanging ourselves in the expenses for years. And I'm not being emotional, but is that fair to the parents? Is that,
That's exactly my thought process. I as I sit here, I'm having a really difficult time thinking that we're going to send, that the message to be delivered is July 1, your rates are going up, and June 30, the program ends.
No,
January 1st.
January.
January 1st. Yeah, yeah, you meant January 1st. January 1st, your rates are going
Right.
up, and then June 30th, you're done.
Yeah.
Because we may have people that may just bail right then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
It's good.
So I know that we, as a committee, have been talking about this for a few weeks now. The one thing we haven't done is given any indication, because we were fact-finding and getting all the data together. And I know that we had talked about having some type of vote this evening. I feel fairly strongly that we should send out a communication to families and give them an opportunity to listen to some of our deliberation on the issue before we send any communication. I don't know if that's in the form of a public hearing so that we could hear comments from the families that would be impacted, but as we're talking about increase or not increase, now that the potential of the program potentially coming to an end on July 1st, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to not do some sort of vote, to get some communication out to the impacted families, give them an opportunity to come to a meeting, or we make it a public hearing, so that we'll probably have to repeat some of this conversation and discussion, but so that they can understand what's behind this.
I actually like that idea. I think that we owe that to the parents now. And I think that'll give us the opportunity. What I think the action steps are is that a carefully worded communication goes out to the parents. And I think I would ask that the committee has a chance to look at it before it goes out. But I also think we should be crystal clear.
Yes.
Is that, and I'm just speaking out loud, that we've been analyzing both the revenue and expenses of the extended day program, and we are in a serious budget shortfall. I keep on saying the viability, but the viability of the program is in question, and the school committee on November 29th will be having a conversation where a vote will be had on whether the program exists in next year and going forward. Please come. And I don't think we have to do it as a hearing, but I would, if parents want to come and want to speak, we could even do a very special, like, please, if you plan on speaking, sign up and have some flexibility. Those are our rules. We're not breaking any laws. I think you're right, Ms. Gibbons. I think that's a great idea. I'm not sure that the decision will be changed because of people coming here.
Sure.
But I think we have to give people a voice. They have to have the ability to voice their concerns and to be heard. And I think that will also give Mr. Wiggin, I've been keeping Mr. Wiggin very busy as of late. But it'll give him to do a little bit of a cursory search to see, is there some sort of funding? Is there out there? I suspect he's very savvy that if there was, we would have found it. But it would still give you a little bit more time just to, when we're sitting here, you can say, I can't find it. I can cover the budget deficit this year, but I can't find the revenue that you need. And I feel bad. I don't know, and I know we're speaking on YouTube. Dave, how many viewers? Zero.
Not even Robin.
It won't let me log in. It keeps saying I
So,
don't have permission.
I
tried.
suspect even though there's no YouTube video, this may be percolating amongst the program, is it?
A little bit. I think it will definitely, obviously, percolate now, because I think they will want to, obviously, that's one way to get the word out once we have the appropriately worded message.
And I also think maybe that however you want to have a conversation with Janine and kind of
Yeah, we will
be
do that.
delicate with.
We'll do that.
So, go ahead, Mr. Conroy.
I like the idea. I'm also wondering if, because, listen, we're making, especially the current year conversation, we're doing it based on assumptions of ourselves not wanting to impact families at an extent that we feel is too much. Is it worth, in this communication, maybe sending out basically a survey that said, if the cost went up 10%, if the cost went up 10%, would you return next year? If it went up 20%, would you return next year? If it went up 30%, would you return next year? I struggle with the idea of a program ending and increasing rates this year.
I'm with-
However, if we found that out of these 111 students, that families would stay at a 20% increase, or 80% of them would stay at a 20% increase, and then that changes the dynamic to 20% now. I'm just spitballing, but 20% now, maybe FY '24 is flat, but then 25 goes up 5%. Or, is it 20 now, but then and then small increments. Like, does the big hit, if people are going to stay, does that shift that whole subsidy value, down to the point that we can, at 20%, and even 10%. 10% shifts it to 43, which doesn't move the dial for us for this year very well, very much. But at 20% it does. 20% means a $14,000 shortfall this year, which probably means, even if we were at 16 next, we do 20%, then we give a hiatus for a year. We eat the next 16,000. Then the following year it's 5 versus this 3, and then, and we're in single digits for a couple of years, and then we get there. But if we put out 10%, 20%, 30%, and 50% aren't coming back, then we know. That's our threshold.
We do this, we do the announcement, we do the survey, and then we invite them to the meeting.
Do we even put in 10% because it doesn't take enough of a
Yeah.
bite out of it? I
was
almost feel like we
thinking
do.
15, 20,
Yeah.
25? Or do we do 15, 25, and I don't want to say 30. 30 is a tough number.
The reason for 30 is 30 closes the gap right now.
Right.
I would do those 4 if it were me.
What would you do?
15, 20,
You're writing the
25,
letter,
and 30.
so, what is it?
Well, in the survey, I would do 15, 20, 25, and 30.
Okay.
Because I think that will give you a response spread as
Yeah.
to what your drop-off would be.
Yeah.
Especially if we do 15 and we take a year off, because instead of doing 10, taking a year off, we're doing 15, take a year off. So that would be a 10% increase this year,
Right.
5% next year, but we're taking it.
Right.
Well, I keep on saying next year, but you know what I'm,
Next school year.
the next school. I think this is the right approach. Denise, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's, not that anyone's going to go back and look at the videos. This has not been an easy conversation. I think part of the reason is we were looking for additional data is because I think the news was bad, and we weren't just trying to delay the conversation, but we were looking under every rock, and you've done a good job, but I just don't, without this influx of new money, whether it be from the parents or from another funding source, where this program is in peril. And I just think we owe it to the parents to give them a voice, but also to have a frank conversation on that night and let them know.
And we may be surprised. The alternative of finding another alternative might be worth, to Mark's point, might be worth them saying, you know what, increase it 20%. We want the program.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, that way, like you said, they'll have a voice, and they might lead us in an unexpected direction.
Mr. Mulaney, any thoughts?
Well, again, I just,
like, you know, as you've said, the program has done great things for our families.
100%.
You know, it's education. It's not just, you know, a place to drop your kids off. The kids are learning. They're learning through play. And another thing that's been great about the program is a lot of high school kids work there. And a number of those high school kids have gone on to become early childhood teachers and those instructors in training. So there's
There's a lot.
multiple benefits to this program. You know, if the financial picture does not look good, but if we can find a way to keep this program going.
So,
Mr. Conroy.
Terry, just because you're probably already going to plan on doing this, but, so in lieu of that, can you have those that projection column for us, that projection table at the 15, 20, 25, and 30? So if we did those this year, how does that alter that, and then do the same?
So for the 6
So-
months,
So from January
Right, so if parents come back and say,
We have that though?
Yeah, you already
We
have
have
that.
that. I think it starts,
In the green.
That's essentially what you have.
yeah.
no, so the green box, it's based on
No, above.
5%
No, the
increase.
Above the green.
Above the green box.
It's not highlighted, it's
Towards
just
the very
green.
top section, I think, right, Terry?
Yeah, very top section. That's essentially the impact for this year.
So the
Right, but it's
unshaded
still-
first box.
Right, but I want to know, so this green box down the bottom said.
You
if we-
want to know what happens in FY '24,
Yeah.
FY '25.
I want to know how
Oh,
fast
sorry.
we get to, how fast are we, because
Yeah.
at an annual
Got it.
increase
Oh,
of
you want the final box at those numbers?
Right,
The
'cause I
final
wanna
green
know-
box
He
at
wants
the,
my bottom box to
yeah,
be
at
altered.
15, 20, 25, and
Right.
30.
Well,
Okay.
to
Is
say,
that,
if,
Yeah.
you
is
know,
that the red box?
No. What he wants me to do is take, in other words, really what we're doing is we're altering the bottom one.
Yeah.
So we're taking the green box,
Yeah.
where I've done long-term projections, and instead of basing them on 5%, basically I'll create another one that's based on, or other ones.
right,
Based
where
on
the
each of those
where the
scenarios.
first FY '23 will be different, the
Right.
rate increases for '24 and beyond will can
Right.
stay at that 5 and 3, like.
Right,
But
exactly.
it's just,
They'll all have a different basis.
right, how far does those negatives move to the left?
Right. It's really actually pretty easy, because the only thing that's really changing is the revenue.
Right.
so I like this approach. I don't like, I don't like where I think this is possibly going, but I think this is the right approach. Terry or Bob, can you guys collaborate on the letter/survey? I don't think it has to be an overly elaborate survey.
I'm sure we can.
And then it would be great if we could get it out by next Monday, if possible. I'm not gonna put Friday's a day off. So if we could get it out early next week, we don't wanna send it out Thanksgiving week, because then we're right up
Yep.
against it. So
Yep.
at some point, how about early next week, if we
Early
can
next
get
week.
it out?
As early as
Nope.
you can.
As
That's
early
fine.
as can.
We can do
That
that.
will give people Thanksgiving week, and then the week after is actually the meeting, so we want to give them a little notice.
I'm wondering if we can put like the table that you have in here with the percentages, so parents could quickly see like, okay, like, well, that's $18 extra, or that's 20. So
The
they
parent
don't-
table.
The parents,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
parent
and
table.
The parent
The
email.
parent table.
So that,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Good
that
point.
they,
Yeah, because then they can individualize, like, this is
Yep.
what it means.
yeah,
to
they
me.
can look at their budget
Yep.
instead of having to bring
Yep,
out the
I agree.
calculator.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on this?
No, only, just, if we could have, when we get the results of the survey, it'd be helpful to know how many families we send it to and how many.
Yep,
Filled it out.
respondents, yeah.
And you're going to ask, of that, how many kids do they have, right? So it shouldn't just be a family, it could be, someone could have 3 kids.
Right.
Should they fill it out 3
Right,
times?
like how many individual, my question is, how many individual families are there?
And what,
And how,
And how
and
many
what
respond.
right. Because that gives us an indication of how,
Yep.
how much those.
Who's
are.
actually reading?
Well, that and who's responding, like, are we?
Yeah, what
because
percent?
we're,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we're,
Right.
chances are we're gonna put a lot of weight on those results.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
And
right
if
now
it's
there's
4
0.
people.
Right, and it's 4
Right.
people,
Yeah,
Right.
like,
Yep.
All right, would you like to stay in the hot seat?
Sure, why not?
So, I'm gonna channel Dave Baker. And sometimes you have to speak to the camera, even though no one is watching. At the FinCom meeting, the first time Ms. Gibbons and I were there to present on the Millis and the MSBA project, there was a side question by FinCom about, or referencing the $360,000 in additional revenue we received last year to offset the under-budgeted, out-of-district sped cost, tuitions. The last meeting we had, we discussed, it was a $500,000 shortfall. We found, and we walked through it, we found 140, and then the town added $360,000 extra into our operating budget. So the question at FinCom was, are you going to be in the same position next year to request additional operating budget funding? Because it was not set up as a one-time deal, but it wasn't forever, meaning we were going to revisit the conversation every year. So I asked Mr. Wigan and Mr. Mullaney to do a deep dive on what the sped cost looked like in FY24. Understanding that when I made the request, it was still in October. We're only 2 months into a school year, and we're asking Mr. Wigan to project in Neely, to project enrollment, and try to come up with cost. And that's difficult. And I had another conversation with Mr. Berube saying that we're working on it, that we were not hesitant to provide information, but we wanted to be very clear that things could change dramatically. But we would operate on what we know now, what we think the future will be, and still have a big asterisk. And then we had an additional conversation that we didn't have to come back to FinCom, but we should talk about this at a tri-board meeting. The tri-board is the school committee, the FinCom, and the board of selectmen, the select board. We had discussed amongst the 3 boards having a meeting sometime in December, get through town meeting and have a meeting in December. So we are pulling together information to have a conversation at tri-board that could impact what our additional ask for sped out of district and in district costs that we can't cover in our own operating budget with the 4% generalized increase that we receive. One thing that's jumping out, and which was discussed at last meeting, was there's a 14% increase in out-of-district tuition. So whether we gain any new students go out or we lose any, there's going to be a 14% increase. So part of the conversation was, part of the ask of the admin team was, what does the sped population out of district look like right now? What do you know? Are there going to be people aging out? Do you know that there's people coming into the district or people in district right now that will be going out? And then add the 14% on top of that. We also asked and said, please don't self-edit. What does a fully staffed fully expensed sped program look like? So, I think that's the intro, right? Am I missing anything on the intro? So, I'd like to go over these numbers, and I also want to say that this is not a self-edited document. This is not the proposal that we're going to necessarily put forward at Tri-Board, but we, as a committee, have a duty to ask all of the questions, get all of the information, and then, just like we have done with the extended day, ask additional questions. So thank you for the work that you've put forward today and up to today. And quite honestly, there's a chance, I'm not hoping planting a seed with anyone, a question could come up at town meeting on Thursday. So even though this may not be a complete document, the work that you have done have put us in a better position to stand up at town meeting to have a conversation. So I did a look at this memo, and then there's a large number there. Significantly larger than the $360,000 that we asked for last year. But it's also unfair to just say 360. It was $500,000 shortfall. So we got 360 from the town, but there was another 140 in savings or reductions, and you moved money from one item. So could you walk us through what you have found so we can start to wrap our head around what a number, a request, or at least a way to alert the other two boards that this is coming down the pike?
So the memo that's before you, I think I broke into 4 parts. So let me take them in order, and certainly one of the largest part of the memo certainly is out-of-district tuitions, and you alluded to some of the factors driving it already. But right now, in this year's budget, our out-of-district tuition budget is $1,796,323. If we took current tuition amounts, and by the way, there is a placement, there's a placement that we can put to every one of these numbers that you see in that summary table. So there is detailed data behind every one of these numbers.
Thank you for that.
Okay? So if we were to use current numbers, and again, it assumes that there will be some children that will be aging out. There are some children that will be coming into placements that we have found already this year. But putting that all together as of, I think it was the end of October, okay, with no increases, that would be $2,090,685. There is a 14% increase that was set. It's not set arbitrarily by the schools. People need to understand the Operational Services Division of the state of Massachusetts sets this rate. So it is not something that's unilaterally done by any of the out-of-district placements. They have to apply for it, and it was set earlier this year. That is a $292,000 and change increase. So bottom line is, we're looking right now, with everything we know right now, for tuitions for next year to be $2,383,381. That's a $587,000 increase in out-of-district tuitions, or a 32.68% increase. Now, there's a couple of notes that I need to make with this. Typically speaking, there is something called extraordinary relief, which comes into play if, in a given year, you exceed basically 25% more than the previous year. That may or may not come into play here because you have one line that does, you have another line that does not. So it's a little iffy right now for us to be able to say, yes, we'd get additional revenue to offset some of this. And then extraordinary relief is also always dependent on how much the state has in the fund. Because if the state has a fixed amount of money in the fund, it's usually not 5 million, $5 billion it must be. And it's divided up, it's, if there's more than that, then they start apportioning that division, even though it calls for 75%. So that is a factor that will come into play here. Any questions on tuitions?
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
so just to be clear, this is based on, when you look at the FY '24, you're taking people that are aging out, and then people who are going out of district or new,
Yeah.
okay.
There's a body that's either going out or coming in,
Okay.
or here and moving,
So
moving
this is
on.
not just taking what we have right now on October 28th?
This is not a statistical exercise.
Okay, fair
This is,
enough.
this is body by body.
Okay,
Terry, what's the contingency placement?
The contingency placement is a situation where we have, I believe it's two, I know it's two, where we have two identified cases that we believe are probably going to become an out-of-district placement. But we couldn't tell you it's going to be, whether it's going to be a private school or a collaborative. So they're in there as a contingency. That was the best way to identify it, frankly.
So they're here this year.
Yes.
And
Yes,
we think that.
it's a
so
fairly strong likelihood.
As opposed to, and just to make sure we have these, so as opposed to the first two categories, well, really the first three categories,
Yeah, the first three categories,
are,
they're all someplace.
they're already there,
Right,
tied to an existing location.
correct.
This contingency placement line is,
They're in the evaluation stage, might be the best
Right.
way to describe it.
so, not that we're asked, but it's an identified students, unidentified
Placement,
placement.
yes,
So we're making an estimate.
yeah.
So then the question is, just because you've alluded to it being two students, is that estimate of basically saying, 75,000 per, is that enough?
We're comfortable with this
Okay.
right now.
Okay, that's, all right, so, because I didn't, and I may have just missed it down below where it said, so, because you have some of the ins and outs that create the private school placements of how we got to that change.
Right.
So really, these are also new placements for anticipated new placements next year.
Correct.
Gotcha.
so just to overstate the obvious that's in front of everyone, without us doing anything, we are at, and I understand your notes down below, just assume, let's just go with what you have. It is a 33% increase.
Correct.
And this is not, what I'm about to say is not anything negative on the process that the 65-35 split and the 4% growth that we've agreed to. I think that's the right way to go. We don't even get close with 4%.
Correct.
28%. Like,
Correct.
that's, and this is just tuitions. This doesn't look at inside the building and other services, because not all sped is related out of district.
Correct.
Granted, it's a huge driver because the cost exponentially increase when they go out of district.
Correct.
So that is, I'm preaching to the choir here, but that is for the general public and more for the tri-board. This chart alone is the most telling thing. 33%. And to quote Peter Germain, an unfunded mandate from the state. That not only is unfunded, they're allowing a 14% increase. When's the last time they, I don't know why I'm yelling at you. When's the last time they had an increase?
2 years ago, I think.
What was it then?
Probably like 2%.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
14.
Increase.
The history
have
is,
been-
the history has been under 3.5% annually.
So how, because until this came out, I didn't even know this was a thing, that they could change. I mean, this is, it worked, but this is, again, for municipal budgets, this is akin to, you know, the Tri-Counties and Norfolk Aggies. They can change anything, they can change their tuitions and they can change their rates above the Prop 2.5. Is this something that should be appealed to the legislatures, people on Beacon Hill? Like, this
Funny you
is
should mention that.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that, or?
Don't
Well-
sign any letter until we look at it.
Well-
The Mass Association of School Superintendents and MASBO are working with their.
Our professional organizations are working jointly to
with their
appeal this.
legislative arms to appeal.
Is Mask involved?
I know, I was gonna say, why are we?
I'm not sure if MASC is
always a
involved.
debate between the
I'm kind of,
advocates and
I'm kind of assuming they are, but
I haven't seen anything though, and they're very,
MASS and
They're
MASBO
very-
work a little closer to
No, I understand.
each other, so.
sure.
But I don't want to, we don't need to, we can move on, but I just, it's mind-blowing to look at that number.
And some of these private schools, not to denigrate these private schools, but
Yep.
they're having trouble with staffing too. They're offering $10,000 signing bonuses. Who's paying for that?
Right.
we are in this 14.
Exactly.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely.
That's crazy.
Ma-
14, if they had not done an increase for like 6 or 7 years, and they said, we're really, the conversation we just
I
had,
was
Yeah,
just thinking about it, right, absolutely,
and we've decided.
right, yes.
And they said, okay, but they did 2%. 2% seems very reasonable to me. Even going up to 3% or 4%, that seems reasonable, because that's within
Reason.
municipal budgets and reason. This is crazy.
May I have the indulgence to bring up one issue and one correction? Okay, you mentioned, and rightly so, that the 14% is a state mandate. It's a
Okay.
mandated increase. But in truth, this is in part due to a federally unfunded mandate. Because when this law was passed in 1976, yes, this is a soapbox I've been on for a long time.
Okay?
Okay? The federal law, 94-142, called for the federal government to fund 40% of the special ed costs. It funded between 7 and 9%, depending on
Have they ever
what
funded
particular
40%?
year. They have never fully funded this. And when IDEA, which did a lot of good things to correct, past problems, I won't take that away from the law, but they conveniently deleted the reference to the 40% that they were going to fund. So there is a large unfunded mandate that has existed for decades from the
Passed
federal
them
government.
to us, to the state.
Correct. Thank you.
So just, looking at the
You're
past, since FY '21, the increases have been 2.72%, 2.26%,
Yep.
2.54%, 14%.
All reasonable. All those twos are very reasonable. And within line with what we do. Mr. Wigan, please continue.
Okay, you mentioned other programs, and there is a program that right now doesn't really have exactly a title. And Bob may be able to describe the program better than I, but basically, the long and the short of it is it would require a teacher and a para for the new program at the high school. There's probably about $1,000 in software, which probably can be covered in the software budget. There would be some supplies, there might be some books. Again, those could be covered in those supply lines, but in general, as you know, those supply lines haven't gone up for probably a decade.
Right.
So it's something that needs to be addressed in a broader issue. We might need a teacher desk and chair, but we've got a lot of stuff in tubes. So, and we know we won't need a file cabinet because we've been very successful recycling old file cabinets by buying, I think it's a $14 lock on Amazon. And it works great. So, so we shouldn't really need file cabinets. And then again, typically if we've got a new teacher, new para, then there is some new computer equipment that would be needed. I'm not sure, given the room description to me, I'm not sure a projector is going to be needed. It might already be in
I
that
think
area.
there's already a projector.
I think there's already a projector in the room. So, so projector probably isn't needed.
Well, we're getting a little bit in the weeds here. So
But that's $100,000
So-
in round numbers.
I wanna balance this conversation, this next part of the conversation. One, we asked for this, thank you for providing. And so I'm gonna be very fiscally oriented here and ask questions. Will this extra $100,000, right, let's just call it 100, it is 100. This 100,000, does this, and I'm tempering this, does this keep people in district?
Yes,
Does it save us money?
yes.
Is there a way for you
But-
to project?
Actually, I need to modify that answer slightly.
Go ahead.
It doesn't truly save you money, but it is a cost avoidance. So I mean,
Explain.
it depends on how you,
Yep.
in other words, you're gonna pay $100,000 versus conceivably paying $400,000 to
For four
send out a
kids.
district.
So, and I am making this about a budget, right? Because
Yeah.
this is a budget memo.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, I would love to fund this, it sounds like it's a good program, we should do it, but we're having a budgetary conversation. And I also, it's not lost on me that we're looking at a 32% increase a couple pages ago.
Yep.
So when we look at what our ask is and what we present,
Yep,
I think we just have to be thoughtful about it.
right.
So, because I think the question would be, well, what would be the cost savings? Other than providing high-quality education, which is always our driver, but when we're looking at an ask of 6 figures, if not, actually
We-
more, 7, what is this?
So that's three students, say, in that program that don't wind up on that page with all
So
the
if you,
data.
so if you
away
take like
from the top?
85K
It
a
does not-
person,
No, it's.
it avoids sending 3 at
Right.
85K a
Avoids
pop, call
adding
it.
three
So,
to
yeah.
that top page.
So
I,
They
I was
were, in
one
fact,
off. I
those
said 400,000, it's
students
300,000.
weren't factored in to that.
They weren't factored
First.
into the top because you added
So
the thing
you
at
have
the bottom.
specific names that if we don't do this 100,000, and as Steve said, if we are going to be going and asking for a significant
push
amount of
back
money,
hard.
there is not going, unfortunately, I don't think that we are going to be in a position to ask for anything that is hypothetical.
We can detail out the alternative cost.
Yeah.
FY '24 alternative costs, as in,
Perfect.
Yep.
if we do this 100,000, or that number that you showed up above increases by 400,000.
Yeah, we can detail that out.
So these kids are on the precipice of leaving the district?
They could be, because we've started that SEL program in the middle school. And as they progress into the high school, they're gonna need SEL support.
And we avoided, and that was a huge cost avoidance at the middle school level, so, and continues to be.
So you need to update this memo, reevaluate, because I agree with Mark that this is a board and a committee that talks about education, and we value education. When we go across the field, it's about money. And it's about nuts and bolts. So, and I'm not disparaging our colleagues because they care about education, but this number is significant, and they're gonna look at this and say, all right, what does this $100,000 get us? Is there,
And
is
it
there a
has to
saving?
get it now, not maybe, not a
Yep.
year from now. It's,
We can do that.
So just make sure the number you give us
Is a real number.
is a real number,
Yep.
okay?
Just like all
I
the others,
believe your costs are real, the impact.
No,
Make sure it's
we
real.
can give you a real number. We can put those kids into potential placements.
Okay.
and this is I'm gonna harp on this because we're not gonna be in a good place budgetary-wise with this, and I think we're all gonna have some hard conversations to have short-term that we normally like to try and keep and hold off until April. I think we're gonna need them a lot sooner. This is gonna be akin to the override phrase of, if you're not gonna do it, don't put it on a piece of paper.
That's exactly
So,
right.
if these potential placements associated with this 100,000 aren't going to be in a different building on September 1st if we don't get this 100,000, don't say they are.
Okay.
And then this program becomes an ask, like the wish
Right.
list,
Wish
right?
list,
Right.
right.
Yep.
Right, and it's kind of like a descending order, because
Yeah.
the next thing
Yeah.
in the memo are things that right now doesn't look like a problem. We have 1 or 2 kids move in, could be a problem.
You did exactly what we asked for. This is not a problem. This memo is exactly
Right.
what we asked for. But I do like the way you're looking at it. The first section is, that's not an option. That is it.
Right.
Then as we progress. So please continue, Mr. Reed.
Yeah.
Actually, anything on this, or you go?
Nope, good.
No, so again, the next section, when we talk about positions, again, we want to stress that the next group of positions that we talk about, we're not suggesting that we'd be proposing them at this time,
Okay.
okay? We don't see a need right now. Now, again, in January, that might change. But and again, these are the 2 most likely, if something were to change, that we might find ourselves bringing to you. One is another speech-language pathologist. And again, you've got an estimate there of $71,500 for the wages. And then the other is actually an incremental increase into an existing staff member, one of our occupational therapists. That would be $16,200. Again, based on the current contract, so those numbers are good numbers. If both were needed, that might be $87,700. But again, I want to stress, we're not at this point in time expecting to bring either of those forward. But, forewarned is forearmed.
Transportation.
Transportation. Boy. So, we have probably the need for 3 new vans, one of which is in the works. That's the bad news. The worst news is that right now, getting any kind of van right now for 7D work is impossible. I talked to some of my colleagues at a meeting last week. Some of them have been waiting for vans for 2 years. So this is a problem. The prices are based, they're actually on the high side, but they're based on the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivan. That actually retails for around $43,000. I used 50 as a round number. We do have an earmark still pending to pay for, at least one of those, and you gave me the authority last year to go up to 70. We do have some money in the revolving fund that we could contribute, so, 2 of those we might be able to wangle together between earmark and revolving fund. The third one's, out there is probably an outright purchase that we'd have to figure out. Drivers are another question. We've got 4 drivers, and then just found out from Sandy that we may need a 5th driver because of some changes in the driving staff. So, nothing bad, just an unfortunate retirement coming up, I guess. I put it that way. So, the issue there is simply finding them. And I would say that we advertise all the time. It's very difficult to get drivers. It's easier to get 7D drivers, but even saying that, that's still difficult. And again,
Those are the
talking
big
with
bus
my,
drivers?
say what?
The big bus are 7D?
No, the little vans are
The little
7D.
van, okay.
So it's easier to get 7D drivers. The big buses are almost impossible right now. So.
How many are we down?
We have no spare big bus drivers. We have, we actually have a 7D driver who has a CDL, so that's our spare CDL driver. And then we're getting by, but like, for example, we have a homeless student right now that unfortunately we have to share a very exorbitant cost share with Medway on, because normally we would offer to provide that, and we'd actually, that would be a revenue producer for us, in a sense. But we can't do it because we don't have enough drivers.
What happens in the scenario of us not being able to provide the like,
Well, we get creative. On in-town routes, a lot of times there are ways where you can structure your route so that you can double up. And you can actually do it, and for the most part, you can hit school hours appropriately, so you do not have loss of school time. It's where, in some cases, we can double up kids in a van. We always try to do that anyways if we can. But in some cases, these kids have to be individually transported. We have looked at not purchasing everything as a van. There are always some kids in your mix of special needs that you can transport in a sedan-type vehicle. That may be an option that we have to pursue. It also, when we talk about hybrids, it may be an easier option there if we want to continue with the idea of going with hybrids. So those are some options there on the physical vehicle side. The driver's still the driver. 7D is still 7D, whether you're driving a sedan or whether you're driving a van. And
How long does it get your 70, how long does it
doesn't
take?
take long, and we're happy to train for anybody who watches this, hopefully, once it goes out and is on. We will train anybody for either CDL. We have 2 licensed trainers. We actually train some of the drivers for other school districts because we have 2 licensed trainers in our employ. And we will train anyone
CDL is the
who
bus.
wants to be CDL driver, or which is the big yellow bus, or a 7D driver, which is the van. We would welcome to hire you. We would welcome to train you. They're both very, very good trainers. They're very nice ladies, and happy to bring anybody on board. And you don't need any experience.
And the
Well, Terry
state
Wiggin
has-
needs Indeed. Indeed, I do. You know those ads?
We use Indeed on a regular basis.
Yeah, and the state has made it easier to get a 7D license. They'll have a Saturday where anyone in the area.
Right.
will-
I hope they're not
Bob's-
loosening up too much.
Bob is going this Saturday.
Are you getting the light?
No.
All right, so. I hesitate to even say this enough.
I don't think there's a need to.
Okay.
I think it's premature to say that number yet. I think, I mean, I think the way to describe it is,
Discreet.
yeah,
I looked at you and you said, don't say it.
it's,
Public document.
Yeah, people can.
It
find
is
it.
public
Yeah.
document. These are, first of all, thank you for the work on this.
Yeah.
And I know that this was a lot of work. It's not an exercise in futility.
I know.
I want to get a meeting, a tri-board meeting, early in December, before we can say the holidays are approaching us and we can't do it. We need to start normalizing this number.
This is all work I would have needed to do as part of your budget process
No, I-
anyway, so
Right,
it
yeah.
I
really
know
kind of
that.
gave us a jump start.
I don't take that lightly, that you got a lot going on, and we asked you for another request. So thank you for the work in answering our questions, and this is very, very helpful. It's not necessarily great news, but we're in a better position to go across the field to have us sit down and say, look, this is it. And I do like the fact that you've kind of segmented it. I think, echoing what Mr. Conroy said, go back and look at those numbers.
Look at 'em.
And I sat on this committee when we did an override, and if we're gonna say we're gonna cut, we're gonna cut, or if we're gonna say we're gonna save, we have to save. So that's not a reflection on you, it's just that we can't say something and then not do it. That
I
is
completely
we
understand,
lose our integrity in a moment, right?
completely understand.
So this is helpful. What questions have we not asked? What information do we need, or is this sufficient for the committee at this time? It's still a work in progress because we haven't had the meeting.
Right.
And I would probably I would probably get the memo once we have a final draft ahead of time to Mr. Berube
Yeah.
and to Ms. Underhill and say, look, please look at this.
Let me modify that section first.
No, we're not ready to send this.
Right, no, I know that. We would obviously run it by
We
you anyways.
we would
but-
absolutely get to the
We-
point where we would
Yeah.
have a final document. And maybe you have some of we have some of the stuff in detail for our notes, so when we sit there. So
Right.
we're being transparent. This is a public document, it's already out there. I just weighing, how do we present it in a way that's not overwhelming?
This is what we need right now. I think in advance of the tri-board meeting, I think we, in addition to, you know, nailing whatever number falls out of this finally, I think we also need to be prepared to explain what the impact to our budget would be if we are unable to
Oh.
get more than 4%.
That was gonna be my next.
Yeah,
And again, unfortunately, this is gonna be a conversation we're gonna have months earlier than we normally would. But it's also, I think it's gonna be imperative, and I think it's gonna be a very difficult conversation. But again, to reiterate, you know, more often than we want to, we also need to be prepared that whatever we say we're gonna have to do is what we're gonna have to do.
Can I just clarify something? If we ever have to make cuts, that decision is our decision. I do agree with you, though. We shouldn't say we're gonna do A and then do C, right? And so things can change
Right.
between now and budget cycle, but I would echo what Mr. Conroy said. Make it as realistic as possible to what it would actually look like, understanding that things could change.
Absolutely, but it's and initially, this is, and we're gonna have to do this probably multiple times, of understanding what the impact is and, you know, things I've heard of, well, what are they doing for themselves? So what are we doing to mitigate? So, you know, and we do it every year, but how many of these revolving funds are we basically emptying out? Or, you know, last year we had a $500,000 deficit. The town supported us with $360,000. That was the baseline. So now, if we're gonna be in a position to ask for more, then we kinda have to show we've done some stuff on our own to do that.
agreed.
And last, it will never be the last, I should not say the last question. Are there other parts of the budget, non-sped related, expense costs, staffing costs, or holes or needs that should become part of this conversation? And this is not a wish list. This means if we looked at how we're operating today on November 7th, what do we need to do to operate next year?
I think there probably are. I think it's a little early to go there yet. I mean, I think there's some discussions I'm having with different administrators about some things, and I think you mentioned the budget process is gonna need to start earlier, and we are starting earlier. So I think we really haven't refined exactly what those areas are yet, but
I'd
That's
say
fair,
off the
but-
top of my head, energy.
yeah, energy is a really kind of a wild card right now. The good news is we have the town has a gas contract through 2025.
Okay.
It has an electric contract through 2025. We are the envy of all the districts around us. Okay? And they hate it every time I have a meeting of the area business administrators because I keep saying, oh, by the way, we have these contracts in place. But it,
60% increase.
yeah, it is going to be an issue, you know, that we have to look at. And of course, we're still getting a handle on how the solar at Clyde Brown School is affecting that.
Well, the good news is they're feeling the same expenses, right? I mean, they're.
Oh, yeah,
they're-
absolutely.
So and I know the budget, but the reality is, once we have that conversation with the tri-board, we really are starting our budget process.
Oh, yeah.
So we will stay that this is, for the sake of this conversation, to answer Mr. Berubic's question, we looked at sped, but we're not saying that there's not other costs. We're going through that process. So some of it is about how do we frame it and what do we say. But if there are things that are jumping out at you, we should be putting them on the table, and there's at least that energy conversation, because Mr. Gazinski is going to say, I'm suffering from the same thing, right?
Right, and to be honest with you, I've already set up my template for my first red, white, and blue sheet. I've thrown in some preliminary play numbers, and they're, trust me, not even close to what's going to be, so.
Thank you for this work. We'll get through town meeting, and then I'll try to set up that tri-board as early as possible into November. I think we're in a very good place. November.
December.
December.
There's no time to learn. We looked at all scat. I mean, that was our learning.
I think that's the
Like
scientific
a year
term.
ago.
That is a term. It's about nature. I know nature. You know that, Denise. The chair report. One was the FY24 sped cost. We just did a thorough vetting of that. Thank you again, Mr. Wigan, Mr. Mullaney, Neely, and whoever else worked with you on that. Please pass on our thanks. The MSBA project update. We have town meeting. We have our feasibility study. And it's $1.3 million. And the expenses are anywhere from 8 million to 12 million. And if we don't pass the feasibility study, and we don't pursue state funding, we have to pay that money out of our own pockets. And we have educational needs, we have space needs, we have absolute mechanical needs in this building that need to be addressed. I think the feasibility study is a great way to have trained experts come in and really evaluate this building and see what we need to bring this building up to date, fix the systems that we know are going down, and how do we improve education while getting a subsidy, our own money back, let's be clear. They take a penny from every dollar, every tax dollar. Let's get some of our own money back. I'm not politicizing anything. I'm not telling people how to vote. I'm just trying to explain where we stand. Denise, any other thoughts?
No, I think you've covered it.
Ms. Gibbons will answer any and all questions about the feasibility study at
Happy
town
to.
meeting.
Yes.
Thank
happy-
you for that.
Ready.
I'll be there in case something happens. The superintendent report.
I just have the November enrollment. We've stayed the same. We down a student at the high school and picked up a student in the elementary school. And a family with 2 students that were choice have moved into the district, so our choice numbers are down by 2. So we're at 66 currently.
And then, can I I know what your next,
Yeah, do you want
Yeah, let me-
new business or?
let's, no, we could talk about it now. I think it was a week ago. I don't know, the weeks have
Yeah, it was last week.
blended in. Last week, Mr. Mullaney gave me a call and explained that there was an immediate need for a new professional in the Clyde Brown School. There was a student that IEP was changed that day, and there was an immediate need to immediately hire someone to help this student. And so we have no obligation, we have no opportunity, we can't say no, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. We can't say no. I told Mr. Mullaney, because at this point, there is a vacant middle school para position. So we had money in the budget, and I told him, that we were not gonna let, he had to do what he needed to do to meet the IEP. So he moved forward. I don't know if someone has been hired.
No, not hired yet, but we have a candidate.
Okay. So we
But
couldn't
it's a
wait.
it's a 10-hour position a week.
So when that position comes in, so just from an FTE standpoint, there are no vacant paraprofessionals, correct?
Well, we had a paraprofessional resign this week.
Okay,
So-
but meaning besides that, that would have been the last vacancy filled.
Well, the middle school paraprofessional is,
That,
that's the vacancy where we're
that was the
getting money.
vacancy,
Yeah.
okay. So now, from an FTE standpoint, forget about the person that just resigned. They're all filled. So now what I also see is there's a request. And is this the request for the position that we're talking about right
Right,
now?
yeah.
Do you have anyone else in line? Do you have anyone else in line for the middle school para position?
Right now, we don't.
And is there I'm gonna be careful. Is there a defined need for that? Is there a student who has an IEP with the para that we're not meeting that need at this point?
Not a one-on-one, no. We've been able to cover it.
So this was support, classroom support. We can put this on a vote for the next meeting, but here's the question. Knowing what the conversation we just had in the deficit, should we be bringing on another salary? Mr. Wigan, could you come back, please, just for a second? Mr. Conroy?
I'd forgotten this was
So,
coming up.
so I think
I did too.
I think we have to. I think what we're saying is, if this is a 10-hour-a-week position, so theoretically.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning, should we now be looking to fill the middle school position or just use this position and it
Well,
takes
do we
that
have-
salary?
Do we currently have the middle school position posted?
It's posted this.
You can't find it.
Yeah. So,
So
I mean,
let me be clear on my question.
trying.
We're doing this no matter what, right?
Yeah.
There's almost there sounds like there's someone in the loop. Do we then pull down the middle school posting? Because can we afford to, what's a para,
At this point,
give me a middle number.
rough
Middle
number, at this point in time, if we were to hire a pair, we're probably talking, I would say no more than 20 for the rest of the year.
So it's a $20,000 cost, which may not seem big, but we're also looking at a shortfall, right? We're looking at
Correct.
going
Now-
forward. So we'd be adding an FTE, which is designed but it's mandated by the IEP. We have a vacant position that's not guided by an IEP, would be great to have, but from a budgetary decision, not a programmatic or educational decision, that's the question.
So a couple of different things, because Bob and I obviously talk about these things when they come up. There's a couple of different ways that you could look at covering this position. One is the way you just described, in that open middle school position is still being carried in the budget as an anticipated expenditure. So if that wasn't to happen, obviously, then that money shifts to this position that's being proposed tonight. Another, however, is that you spoke about grants, and this unfortunately doesn't necessarily help extend the day, but it does help with this position. We were able to get additional grant money to help pay for our nurse liaison to the tune of an additional $16,000. And then there is still another $7,000 sitting in non-resident tuition related to a student who is already enrolled at the TIES program, has been enrolled at the TIES program, continues to succeed there. We have no reason to believe that's going to change in any way. And so you now have a really quick $24,000 that is available to offset the cost of this position that's not committed, has not been committed in any other way. So there's two different ways that the position could be covered, in my opinion.
So the question is, do we address it tonight, or do we wait until there's a candidate for the middle school position?
I think they're two different questions.
Yeah.
All right, help me with the questions.
So
I've
the
been
question
talking
is,
about-
if we have grant funding for this 10-hour-a-week position, do we use the grant funding to fund that? That's good. But I think you brought up a different question, which is, if we have a vacancy that we have not been able to fill and we're now deeming as not imperative to the point that we are able to shift that position, and given everything that's going on and the fact that we've been on a budget freeze since the second day of school, should that position be eliminated?
We didn't, Mr. Mulaney didn't ask to shift. I asked him, is there money in the budget? Thinking if we hired someone last week, could we fund that position in the current budget? And the answer was yes. They're not, Mr. Mulaney did not say he wants to eliminate the position.
I know, but the question was just, the two scenarios that we had was, we shift money from that middle school
Yep.
position to cover this 10-hour-a-week because we can't hire anybody and because it's not an IEP-based role.
Right.
So it's
Which is
it's
essentially
a-
eliminating the middle school position if you're shifting it to.
Right, if we chose
Right,
to
right,
fund
right.
it that way, you're taking that position away. Terry's saying, we have grant money, but it doesn't, it does then beg the question of, if we have a position that we don't, that's not imperative, that we can't fill, and we are on a complete budget freeze of non-salary expenses, should we not consider pulling the posting down, removing the position, and using that funds to offset all the other shortfalls that we have?
I would advocate not doing that. You know, if a candidate, a viable candidate became available for that position, I think that would be an appropriate use of the funds that have already been budgeted for it. That would be my recommendation.
But then there's also, this whole topic also, to Steve's question as we ended the SPED conversation, we've now just identified an additional FTE in next year's budget, or 0.25 FTE in next year's budget, that we are going to need to fill on top of what's in the memo we just went through. So then that begs the question of how many other, again, we don't know necessarily, but to what degree, even, we had that last section of the memo of, kind of what we may or may not need. Like, again, it's not, in the grand scheme of a $17 million budget, it's not huge, but 16,000 for an increased OT, what is our risk now? Like, how close are we? Are we, like, on the brink where we really need to think about the fact that that's more likely than not going to be something that comes up over the next few months? Or are we really low risk where we're not anywhere near, again, just factoring this stuff in. But, so we've got some stuff already that we've got so this role, I think, does add on to that. Now, I appreciate that we need it, but I think, and maybe it's not now, but as we.
Yeah, if we're,
We
a
get to
couple months from
January and
now
we're in the
we
budget
don't have-
process and we're trying to save revolving funds for the end of the year. And when is the last time was there somebody in this role last year, all year?
Not all year, no.
So we're going on a full school year without a body in this role.
And then if we do use grant funding, what happens next year? Because the IEP is still in place for the next year, and we're gonna get the 16 or whatever, 24,000.
How long does the grant go?
I don't know.
The grant that relates to the nurses is a recurring grant and usually ends up being roughly the same amount each year, now, and it has increased. The tuition, we expect that to continue next year. And there's always a possibility that we may get another student as well. But, I mean, I can't bank on that. I can only bank on the student that I have.
So, we didn't put it on the agenda to vote anyways. So we would have to vote this. Because it's a new FTE. We'd have to vote it next meeting. You're still in a position to hire that person. We have the need, I'm okay with it, right? And so we're not,
But the funding, yeah.
we have the funding source.
Yeah.
So, why don't we put it on for a vote next week, or next meeting? And then have as part of our deliberations, have the conversation then, and we see where we go? Is that good for you?
Yeah.
Good for you guys?
Mr. Chair, the one concern that I have is, it's not an issue in Millis, if anybody follows anything that's watching. Literally, you can drive down the street and you're not just seeing electrical signs about bus drivers or snowplow drivers, you're seeing it about paraprofessionals. I drove through 4 different towns over the course of the week, and that all had those signs in their downtown that said, we need plow drivers, bus drivers, and we need paraprofessionals with a signing bonus and all of that. So even though we haven't had the position filled since some period of time last year, I feel like we're always one student away
Yeah, I know.
from needing something, and it's so challenging to find a paraprofessional that I worry about not continuing the search for one for this middle school, because if we end up really needing one, it's just weighing the risk. That's all. So,
So, Mr. Wiggins,
for next time.
prepare your memo and two scenarios in your vote, right? You know how you recommend a thing? One where we fund this. No,
Okay.
we're not funding it. We're not funding it with the middle school position. It's a question of, no, we don't have to put this
No,
tied to the vote.
it's either funded out of, a portion of it is, it's either funded out of, the 2 scenarios that have been discussed are funding it through a portion of the vacant middle school position, or funding it from a grant.
Put the funding options down, and then we can have a vote. You don't have to write the vote up the top.
I can,
And then we'll do that on the 29th.
I'll work with Bob. We can figure that out.
I mean, this is,
You're really talking about transferring a position is what the other option is.
Right.
A fraction,
it's,
or whatever.
the FTE is the FTE. We're not increasing our
Right.
FTE count.
Right.
It's a question of the funding source. And this is, as hard as this is the kind of conversation we're about to start having,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, we're gonna have a lot of difficult conversations much earlier than expected. And in the past, we were able to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and that rabbit is gone.
This is true.
I'm just gonna make a scat joke. I'm not gonna do that. I don't wanna.
I do, however, have 2 wands in my office, however. as Bob
Rabbit?
can testify.
2 wands.
Oh,
2
wands.
Including the elder wand.
Oh. I know what that means.
Is that a Harry Potter reference?
It's a Harry Potter
Hey.
reference.
You know what? I'm gonna tell you a secret. For the viewing, it's not real. Dinosaurs are not real either. Oh, gee.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, not dinosaurs, dragons, the
Oh.
flying dragons.
I was going to say, wait a minute. What just happened here?
No, the dragon, what's that show,
Okay.
Kyrie?
Dragons.
The
You got
dragon
it.
show.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones,
They're
I
not
believe is what you're talking about.
Not How to Train Your Dragon?
That could be.
All right. Anything else on your report?
Really
that is
uplifting
all.
conversation this evening.
That is all.
God.
It's only November.
Do
Been
we
a
have
long
anything in
time.
executive session? We don't have anything for executive session, do we?
I don't.
All right. With that said, I would stay there for one second. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Dave, tell me when you're shut off.
Please